they'll kind of come out with the bottom line, right? Today we are talking about XYZ, or here's the big truth for the day. Here's the big point for the day. And then that's the last you hear of it throughout the entire message. It's like it never even happened. All the supporting points are kind of disjointed. They don't connect back to it. And it becomes just kind of like, oh yeah, that was nice to think about, but the message really had nothing to do with that. Have you ever listened to a message and when you finished listening to it, you wondered, what was the point? Like, what was the main point that they were trying to make? In this video, I want to talk about what we as pastors and as preachers can do to make sure that our main point or our bottom line, whatever you call it, actually gets communicated and is the hinge that the message swings on and the anchor that the message holds to. This is so vital if you want people to walk out of your sermons knowing exactly what the sermon was about and what they're supposed to do with it. You've got to get the main point down, and the supporting points have to bolster that main point and that bottom line. We're going to talk about how to do that, why you should do that in this episode. This is episode 54 of the Preaching Donkey podcast. My name's Lane, your humble host. It's so great to have you joining me today. If you're watching here on YouTube, welcome. If you're listening on one of the many podcast players that we are on, great to have you listening today. If you are new and you haven't yet, be sure to go to preachingdonkey.com/21 days. You can pick up my free 21-day guide to creating killer sermons. This is a 3-week, 3-step process that will walk you through how to create and deliver a powerful message. Whether you've been preaching for years or you're brand new to preaching and you're just looking for resources to try to help you do it better, do it more efficiently, this is for you. preachingdonkey.com/21 days. All right, so the challenge that we face when we preach is that we have a message that we're trying to communicate. And the problem is sometimes we fail to make a point the main point of the message. So sometimes a message will be several kind of disparate points that are just kind of all over the place, and there's no real cohesion to what we're trying to communicate. And that's a massive problem because it confuses people. It leaves people wondering, what was the point? What were you trying to say? I know we were here and then we were over there and we learned this and we thought about that, but what am I supposed to actually do with it? Well, to correct this problem, a lot of preachers have over the years started doing one-point messages, or a message that's kind of wrapped around a bottom line. And I love this style of preaching. I think it's really, really effective to drive one point home. But typically I will have, and this is one of the ways that I teach how to outline a sermon in my course, Preaching Jumpstart, is to have your bottom line and then make sure that your supporting points, you might have 2, maybe 3 points that kind of bolster and support the bottom line. Make sure those points are actually connected to your bottom line. What I typically will see people do, if they're inexperienced or they're unaware of this issue, they'll kind of come out with the bottom line, right? Today we are talking about XYZ, or here's the big truth for the day. Here's the big point for the day. And then that's the last you hear of it throughout the entire message. It's like it never even happened. All the supporting points are kind of disjointed. They don't connect back to it. And it becomes just kind of like, oh yeah, that was nice to think about, but the message really had nothing to do with that. It's far more impactful to really drill down on a bottom line that works for you and that is tied to the scripture, that really explains and expounds on the truth in the scripture and is action-oriented. And then when that bottom line is nailed down and exactly what it needs to be, make sure that your supporting points really bolster it and serve to stand up the bottom line so that people leave with that main idea in their hearts and in their minds. So the question becomes, how do you do this? Like, how do you have a bottom line that's really strong and then supporting points that bolster it in the way that they should? There are a few steps to this. The first step is always study the text first. We are not creating a main point out of thin air. We are looking at the passage that we're preaching on, or we're looking at the set of text that we're preaching on, or the topic, and we are making sure that we understand what the scripture is saying, and we're drawing out the application and drawing out the main idea. And from that, we will construct a bottom line or a main point. So the very first place you have to start is studying the text. Which, by the way, if you get my guide, the 21-day guide, one of the things that you also get with that is my ultimate guide to Bible study for sermons. That's just a bonus guide that I give you. So if you go to preachingdonkey.com/21days, you can find all of that there. It'll all be emailed to you. So study the text really well, and then craft a bottom line, but keep the bottom line flexible while preparing. The reason why is because as you're teaching through the text and as you're preparing this message, the supporting points are going to need to bolster that bottom line. But that bottom line, that main point, has to be strong. It has to carry the whole message. So hold it loosely as you're preparing. Make your points, like firm your points up, and then go back and firm up the bottom line. Once that's done, you can go back and firm up the points. One of the ways that I like to do this is to put my bottom line in first person. Here's an example from a recent sermon that I gave. My bottom line was, when I experience the love of Jesus, it disrupts my life and changes me. So when I experience the love of Jesus, it disrupts my life and changes me. That's the bottom line. That's the thing that's going to be kind of repeated. That's the thing that I'm going to come back to. As I'm preaching the message, I keep going back to, but when I experience the love of Jesus, it disrupts my life and changes me. So if the bottom line is that, there are 3 supporting points that I tied back to that as I was preaching through this passage in 2 Corinthians 5. The 3 supporting points were: Jesus' love changes how I see others, Jesus' love changes my plans, and Jesus' love changes my purpose. So how I see others, my plans, and my purpose are changed because of Jesus' love. And that shows how the love of Jesus disrupts my life and changes me. So as I'm teaching through this, I'm saying things like, Jesus' love is going to change my plans. It's going to disrupt my plans, but in a good way, because I want my plans to align with God's plans for me, because those are ultimately the better plans. That's ultimately the better way. It disrupts my purpose. I was living for this. I was living for myself. Now I'm living for Jesus. So it both disrupts me and changes me. So my points are really serving to demonstrate, to bolster, and prop up the bottom line, because when people walk out of this message, what I want them to hear is that when I experience the love of Jesus, it disrupts my life and changes me. It's disruptive. In other words, it's going to interrupt my plans and change me. So for that to be the case, these supporting points have to tie back to it. So notice that in these supporting points, Jesus' love changes this, it changes that, it changes this. It's using and borrowing the same language from the bottom line. This makes sure that the 2 things are connected, and that when people leave, they're not confused about what we talked about. It's all about Jesus' love disrupting us and changing us, and it just so happens that it's going to do that in 3 different ways. So work on your bottom line, but keep it flexible. Get your points all worked out, and then firm up both your bottom line and your points, and make sure that you're speaking the same language all throughout the message. And then what I like to do is at the end of the message, we circle back to the bottom line and really drive it home again. It's like all of these kind of points were made about Jesus' love and how it changes me, to kind of show at the end of the day, the thing we know to be true is that when I experience the love of Jesus, it disrupts my life and changes me. That's what I want people to walk away from this message feeling and knowing and thinking. And then from there, I'm able to draw out some applications and draw out some ways that people can go live this out. But at this point, what we're talking about is merely the bottom line and the supporting points and how they work together. Now, some people will do just a bottom line and tie the whole message around it and not really make any other points, and that's totally fine too. I just prefer to have some pillars along the way that help support and bolster that structure of the bottom line, if that makes sense. So let me know how you do it in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on one of the many podcast players, be sure to leave me a review. Let me know what you think. I would love to see you in the next episode, which is coming out next week. Until then, remember, if God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through you, and he can speak through me. We'll see you next time here on the Preaching Donkey podcast.